Hello, welcome to the Washington Line. Today we are going to discuss about upcoming election. Here with us, Edward Stafford, who is retired from the U.S. Foreign Service Officer in 2016, and his most recent overseas assignment was as counselor for political military affairs in Ankara till 2014. Welcome to the program, Edward.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Uh, Great to see you. And Edward also has been a long-time Ahval contributor, and since we are going to talk about elections today, I think that should also I should also add Edward also has been a lifelong conservative. We are going to talk about mainly today how a potential or likely Biden victory and surprise Trump victory would impact on Turkey policies mainly. But before that, I just wanted to uh, get a sense of what is your feeling. There's only 1 week left for the election. What do you see happening? Do you think another upset like 2016 possible, or this time we should mostly believe and trust the polls?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that there was recently an interview. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was CBS News interviewed Joe Biden and asked him what he thought, and he said, "Well, we're going to keep going right till the end because we don't want any surprises." So I think everybody is aware that Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, is ahead in the national polling, and he looks pretty good in the state by state polling. But that doesn't mean that an upset, which it would be, um, could not take place. As many people understand about the U.S. electoral system, the way it works, you're not really running one election; you're running 50, and there's 50 states. And what happens is after you figure out who has won the votes in that state, then you have to start counting what are called the the great electors, or the people of the electoral college, and they make the final decision, which is what happened to Hillary Clinton in 2016. She won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but because he won uh, narrowly in many cases in enough states to get enough electoral votes, he needed 270 and he got 306, which means he still has a margin to lose in 2020. So if I were a betting man, um, I would probably put money on Biden to win, um, but I wouldn't put a lot of money. It's just and all the pundits are saying the same thing, that you know it's could be a surprise again. There's a number of missteps that Donald Trump has made, and the whole pandemic, coronavirus, the impact of that politically. Uh, you know, um, Everybody in the Trump camp realizes that right through the real serious outbreak of coronavirus in the United States, quite frankly, he was coasting to a victory. The unemployment was, you know, less than, I think, 3.5%. The economy was growing. Um, and people, unless there's some other issue that overwhelms their decision making, they usually vote on the economy. But Joe Biden has, I think, been very effective in painting a picture of Donald Trump not handling the coronavirus pandemic well. And that seems to be working for Joe Biden. So all of that to sum up saying Biden's victory is most likely, but Trump still has a narrow path to victory. So let's go on.
Uh, just today, I looked 538.com, and it was saying uh, there's a special exclusive analysis on Pennsylvania, and it says that if uh, Trump loses that state, the chance of Trump winning the election is 2%, and if Biden loses, it reduces to 30%. So it's like 2000 Florida now, 2020 Pennsylvania. It looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll go back to the number that Trump won in the 538 that you refer to refers to the total number of electors. So to win, you need 270, which gives you a bare majority.
Yeah.
Trump won 306. So even if he lost Pennsylvania, which I believe is about 20,
Yes.
he could still win. But if he lost Pennsylvania and really anything else, it's over. So
Yeah.
he really has to hold on to everything that he won in 2016 or only lose one or maybe two small states. And it's the polling has been consistent that in many of those places where he won with a very thin majority in 2016, he's the polling data shows him behind Joe Biden. So it's again, you cite 2%. Yeah, that's a pretty narrow pathway.
Yeah. Uh, okay, let's go to our main topics, which is likely Biden victory. How do you see Biden is going to approach Turkey? And we can, I think, safely assume if Biden takes over by January, end of January, we will still see Turkey's strongman Erdoğan will be there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that President Erdogan would be happy with the victory of Joe Biden. Joe Biden has within his national security and diplomatic team a lot of people who served with him, either as staff people to him in the Senate or they were advisors to him when he was vice president. And they served then in the Obama administration. The other thing is, and I want to talk a good bit about that actually, is that the Democrats have a number of very strident voices opposed to Turkey, not only to President Erdogan, but to Turkey writ large. And that's, I think, particularly problematic for the relationship between the United States and Turkey, because they're looking at it as Turkey versus the U.S. rather than Erdogan versus U.S. policy, and that those are not the same thing. For example, Tony Blinken, who has been with Joe Biden as a kind of foreign policy advisor, national security advisor type, possibly for as much as 30 years. Served as a legislative assistant for a number of years. Then he was his national security advisor. Eventually, he was on the President Obama's national security staff, and then he was over at the State Department as the Deputy Secretary of State. He's coming back now. No one's really sure whether he would be coming back as the national security advisor or he would be coming back as the Secretary of State. That seems to be, but that's a very senior level, whichever one it is. So Blinken's coming back at a very senior level. What does that tell us about relationships with Turkey? he's less prone to see Turkey as an essential element of U.S. geostrategic policy in the greater Middle East and in Southeast Europe. He's more likely to ally with those who tend to see Turkey, or at least Turkey under Erdoğan, as more of a problem than as a friendly resource. There's also Jake Sullivan, who's going to come back with a senior role, and Jake Sullivan has been with Biden again for a number of years, had a number of roles: National Security Council, State Department. A little different because Jake Sullivan was also kind of working with Susan Rice. And one thing that seems to be clear about all the people around Biden, I mean, the more senior people in this, he's got this huge team of foreign policy experts, but many of them are just throwing their name on the list. And Susan Rice is incredibly absent from the planning that Biden is doing. That's surprising to me because obviously Susan Rice was one of the most senior people working with Obama. So what that says about the relationship between, Team Obama and Team Obama and Team Biden, that'll get sorted out. But in essence, Joe Biden also has to be concerned about the domestic politics, and this brings us into a discussion of the two places in the United States that have the most strident anti-Turkish communities. One is northeastern New Jersey, where there's a very active Armenian diaspora and an Armenian American community. And the other one is in Southern California around Los Angeles, the same thing. And, not to go too deeply into American domestic politics, Senator Robert Menendez, who probably has a good shot at becoming chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to a large extent, his re-election campaigns depend on money from the Armenian American community. Mm-hmm. So that's not great news. And so he's going to be more influential. Now, the Obama administration was able to sideline him when he was not actually getting on board the program that the Obama administration had for relations with Iran and Turkey and other places. And they were able to sideline him for a little bit of time, but those problems are over. Had to do with two things. Don't worry too much about it. But Menendez is back. There's a real good chance he'll be chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's no friend of Turkey, and Joe Biden's going to have to deal with him. Out in California, Barbara Boxer, who's now former Senator Boxer, she was the one who was really close to the Armenian American community. Dianne Feinstein, far less. I have no idea about Kamala Harris, but Kamala Harris is going to, if Biden wins, which looks likely, then Kamala Harris is going to be vice president. So it's an entirely different thing. I don't get the impression that Kamala Harris ever built a real tight network or dependency on the Armenian American community out there. Mm-hmm. I think she had different sources. That domestic politics is going to matter because one of the things that's going to shape the Biden foreign policy is the fact that Trump's America First policies or elements of them are going to continue in Biden.
Let
Um,
let me
yeah, go ahead.
give some background to our viewers. For the last, in Trump administration, we obviously have Mitch McConnell as the Senate Majority Leader, and together with President Trump, they've been able to stop any kind of sanctions hitting Erdoğan. So we are looking at the chances right now, a week out the elections. It seems like over 70% chance of Democrats also taking over Senate as well as Congress and the White House altogether. The trifecta chances of Democrats taking over all three of these bodies over 70% again. If this were to happen, that means that Democrats are also taking over, and the Senate Majority Leader is going to be Schumer. What
Right.
what should we think about Schumer and Turkey?
Well, Chuck Schumer, again, is someone. It's okay. So he has been real hard in his rhetoric against Turkey.
That's right.
Okay. At
Mhm.
the same time, he's been real hard in his rhetoric towards Saudi Arabia, particularly in the case of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And he saw that as indicative of the type of regime that Saudi Arabia is. And he wants the US to distance itself from Saudi Arabia. He has a much more kind of mixed view towards Turkey. I mean, he understands the value of Turkey to the United States, but at the same time, um, he latched on to Turkey's acquisition of the Russian S-400s as proof. It's strange. Schumer wasn't like incensed about Turkey buying um, the missile system as much as he was using Turkey buying a Russian system and then Trump protecting Erdoğan and Turkey from sanctions that Schumer interpreted and presented to everybody as evidence of Trump's collusion with Russia. That's kind of convoluted, but Schumer's interest really in the S-400s was using it as evidence that Trump um, was a friend of Putin, which is why he never bothered really putting on the sanctions against Erdogan that, of course, he's supposed to have put on Turkey, you know, and they
Mhm.
have actually activated the S-400 system now. So Schumer is a little more complex. Um, he doesn't have any kind of animus against Turkey, okay, and he is not beholden to the Armenian or the Greek American communities. And obviously, any senator who was dependent upon either the Armenian American community or the Greek American community, particularly at this time, is going to be difficult, have a difficult attitude or a relationship with Turkey. But Schumer's not there. So he's going to be more flexible. Now, at the same time, um, if you get a Democratic majority in the Senate as well as in the House, and Joe Biden as president, um, I think you can almost count on sanctions coming. Um,
I
you
think
know,
that would be also called as nightmare scenario for Erdogan. Three.
well,
Mhm.
yeah, I agree with you because the reality is that he doesn't have the problem that has developed is that it's not only that many of the Democrats, particularly in the House, who don't really follow foreign policy as deeply as the senators do, um, they have developed an animus against Turkey rather than dissatisfaction and anger with Erdogan for the policies he's implemented. Um, Trump, and I also think, you know, David Satterfield at the embassy in Ankara, and Jim Jeffrey, who's working a lot of the Syria Turkish issues, they have been largely successful in getting through to people the notion that Turkey is too important to lose over the policies of this one guy. Now, of course, as time goes on and Erdoğan keeps winning re-election, it becomes more difficult to say to the kind of anti-Turkish element in American foreign policy that it's not Turkey, it's Erdoğan that's the problem. Because then they say, well, then why did the Turks keep electing him? Of course, they don't want to peel back and see that Erdoğan, I mean, the best he has ever done in any sort of electoral campaign, I think, was the presidential campaign a number of years ago, in which he got 54%. And he wasn't running against really good competition. So, that's not like an overwhelming majority of Turks support everything that Erdoğan does. It's actually a thin majority, and sometimes it's not even a majority. There's a reason he's in coalition with others. But trying to explain that to members of the U.S. House of Representatives is a very, very difficult process. So if it goes all Democratic, look for sanctions, look for a very tough messaging, and look for someone to say, well, President Erdoğan, if you're inviting us to impose sanctions, recently he was saying, go ahead, impose sanctions on me. They'll do it. Now, who they're going to send, boy, that's wide open. I don't know that there's any political, well-connected types that really want the job.
By the way, speaking of Ambassador Satterfield and U.S. Envoy James Jeffrey, Ambassador Jeffrey, it's interesting that it was Richard Doğane and then Ambassador Bass. These two ambassadors were pretty outspoken. I mean, Richard Doğane was less, but then Ambassador Bass, which was an even more difficult time. I think it was between 2014 to 2018. In those difficult years, we remember Ambassador Bass was speaking out in many different occasions, not every day, but a couple times a year on different occasions. And again, Richard Doğane years Turkey was more democratic, and the opposition was more robust, and those were the years Gezi protests also happened in 2013 summer. He talked about Turkish democracy. I remember July 4th of 2013, and very few other times. But again, Ambassador Bass was much more outspoken. But we have not heard anything from Ambassador Satterfield. I don't think he said even a word about Turkish democracy. And Ambassador Satterfield, obviously very experienced diplomat, and Ambassador Jeffrey also doesn't talk about Turkish democracy at all. Is this the kind of the task are they supposed to carry, or this is most we should understand is a personal choice?
No, I think no. This is definitely coming from the White House and from the State Department. Now, having said that, I believe that both David and Jim, David Satterfield and Jim Jeffrey, both of them are much more non-public diplomacy. In other words, they're not going to do a lot of public diplomacy. They're going to go, I mean, they see themselves as bringing a message from the President of the United States to the Turkish government. And unlike, say, the what you're likely to get, by the way, with Biden, a greater focus on human rights reporting, and efforts to comment on human rights, although that is fraught with challenges. I think that's going to happen. So, for example, one thing, and let's for a moment say that Biden wins, but the Republicans are able to hold on to the Senate barely by, say, 51 to 49.
Yeah.
Well, you're still going to have the House pressing, and you're still going to have people pressing for a more robust relationship with Turkey, and a more robust stance on human rights. And that's where Biden people are likely to be. And you're likely to see whoever is named as ambassador, or if there's for a long period, and the charge, a career foreign service officer, is serving as the charge, awaiting some ambassador to arrive. The messaging coming out of the White House and the State Department is going to be more focused on human rights than it has been over the last 3.5 years under a Trump administration. And that's not just for Turkey. It's obvious to everyone that the Trump administration has only in very limited circumstances made a comment on the internal human rights situation of other countries. It's been, if you're Venezuela,
Or Iran.
or Iran, the special envoy or the ambassador is making all sorts of comments, and you'll find their commentary in the Wall Street Journal from time to time. But if it's someone that the White House and Secretary of State Pompeo have decided we don't really want to antagonize, and I'll go back, I'll mention again the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Look at the U.S. commentary on that, okay, compared to any number of countries that would have done a similar thing. I mean, the U.S. response, at best, you can say it was muted. It was almost silent. That will change. That will definitely change under a Biden administration, whether the Senate is Democrat or Republican. The Biden team at the State Department and at the National Security Council is going to be more vocal about human rights situations worldwide.
This is the U.S. institutions we know, right? I mean, I have been covering Washington, D.C. now over a decade. It will be 15 years soon. And I identify myself in the U.S. politics as bipartisan. When I look back, I wish in 2012 Romney won that election. I am really unhappy with Obama's second term, and especially his policies over Syria. It was a just big disaster.
Yep.
And we have seen a lot of results of that very bad policies all over the world, actually. And anyway, it's a long subject. Perhaps we might discuss it in the future. But for the last 2 years, it's really sad situation in Washington, D.C. It's not only 2020 with the COVID. This started with Heather North left the State Department spokesman after that since early 2019. We practically don't have any briefings, very rarely, if ever. In 2020, totally. So, okay, there's COVID, but there is also teleconference. If you cannot invite people to the
Yeah.
press briefing, to the State Department, you can have this. Anyway, so it's a very sad to see that the U.S. State Department has been completely almost muted for the last year or two, and they are very slow to get back to me when I have a question. It takes days and all that. We will see if potential Biden, possible Biden victory, if we'll see the same department we left off 4 years ago. Do you think we will go back, or it will be different from now on?
Well, I think there's two things. There seems to be like two different camps in the Biden foreign policy team. One camp is they want to go back to pre-Trump. Okay. But there's another camp, and I agree with you. I think the second term of President Obama in foreign policy was almost an unmitigated disaster. I mean, I actually have reservations about some of the things he did in implementing restored relations with Cuba, but restoring relations with Cuba was long overdue. It should have been done, decades ago. And in fact, the Bush team was working on it until, they got themselves stuck in Iraq. So, but there's a lot of other people who have spent the last 4 years, in a sense, out in the wilderness. And of course, they've been at these different think tanks. And what they've been doing is saying, wait a second, how do we rejigger American foreign policy? And one of the things they're thinking about is they're going to re-embrace globalism for sure, but they're not going to re-embrace globalism the way it was done in the past. Because one thing that's been made clear to them by Trump's victory and by what he's done is that if there's a disconnect and you cannot explain why you're doing what you're doing in foreign policy to a domestic audience, you've lost them, and you're not going to be able to make progress in your policy. So that means that you've got to improve your messaging. So I'm hopeful that one of the things that will happen is there will be kind of a revitalization of the Public Affairs Bureau in State Department, and they will be engaging more with people, not only domestic audience through journalists and social media and all that, but also internationally. I mean, one of the things you hear from Biden all the time is that the Trump team has not engaged properly, not only with ally leadership, but with allied nations and peoples. And so I think that's going to open up. Now, it's going to be an interesting balancing act because Trump's placement of emphasis on protecting domestic jobs against foreign competition, or what's always called foreign unfair competition, that's not going to go away. And that's actually something that the Democrats are going to have. If you look at their foreign policy plans, the Biden plan, that's something that's clearly going to be integrated. In other words, all the rhetoric that Trump has put out about unfair trade and a non-level playing field, China stealing intellectual property, all those are all going to be part and parcel of policy going forward. In other words, people are going to have to explain it. Now, for Turkey, what does that mean? Well, that means that if we're going to have any sort of real serious engagement with Turkey, and try to keep them on, the Western side rather than a non-Western view, to kind of pull them away from Russia, to pull them away. I was going to say pull them away from Arab states, but I don't know that they have any Arab friends left except Libya and Qatar, right? I think they're that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and with Libya, it's only
Part
half,
of
right?
Libya.
Because
Yeah, sure.
part of
Yeah.
Libya and Qatar, and that's it. I mean, because everybody else is, um,
Hate them.
not. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's you would think it's like 1917. Not to bring up a bad memory, but I mean, 1917 was probably as bad as it could get between Arab nations and Turkey, or at least the Turkish-led Ottoman Empire. So, um, but um, I I don't know that there's going to be much, if any, outreach from the State Department, from public affairs, about why it's so important to keep Turkey on side. Because I do think that if you get the trifecta, you get the president, the House of Representatives, and the Senate in Democratic hands, um, you're going to see a real strong push for sanctions. You're going to see a push for more punitive measures. You're going to see in the press um, people from think tanks suggesting that NATO has never kicked anybody out, but maybe it's time to do so. I mean, there's already people who have advocated finding some way to kick Turkey out of NATO. Um, you know, um, now
By the way, sorry.
go ahead.
By the way,
No,
as we talk and discuss, it seems there are many more subjects to cover here. I am planning to end this within about 5 minutes, but
okay,
I hope that we can do another one because I am looking at my notes. We haven't talked about the Pentagon yet, about possible Michel Flournoy, or
yeah,
I heard Rich Armitage, maybe. Uh, not many places, but uh,
yeah,
some circles talk about that. We haven't talked about Nick Burns. We haven't talked about Phil Gordon. We haven't talked about Brett McGurk. We haven't. I mean, there are quite a few
yeah,
people who have history with Turkey, and I think we need to talk about their history. They're looking at Turkey. Uh, I know that there are people in Washington, D.C. gathering CVs from possible policy people, from think tanks,
yep,
to get ready for possible positions. I am wondering who is going to take over Turkey desk, whether at State Department or White House. This could be another topic to discuss in the
yeah,
next episode. Uh, but I just want to uh, end with this today. Uh, if let's touch a little bit at least, let's say upset victory of
mm,
Trump. Can you tell us, are we going to see real love between or continued love between Trump and Erdogan? Is there any reason we should not believe these very close, tight, good relations between Erdogan and Trump will end in the possible second term Trump administration?
I don't think the Trump Erdogan relationship, personal relationship, has ever been very close. Donald Trump is transactional, and you know when
Let me cut you here. Then, if transactional, what does Trump get in return with these all goodies he has been handing out to Erdogan?
well, I think he thought he was going to get all sorts of goodies, and it has taken some time basically to purge the mentality of a lot of people around Trump. A major one of those has been Pompeo. Pompeo has very little time for Erdoğan, but he has a lot of time for Turkey. He realizes not only the geostrategic, but also he's smart enough to understand that Erdoğan is not wildly popular, and that as long as you can maintain a pretty positive relationship between the United States and Turkey, there's a chance that at the next election, 2023, there will be a change from Erdoğan, and that Erdoğan has made a number of really key errors. The economy, the adventures. Let's see, where we're talking now. We've got Turkish personnel or Turkish sponsored personnel in Syria, Libya, I believe Azerbaijan, although some people argue that that's not true in the Nagorno-Karabakh thing. But the thing is, it's clear that Turkey is expending a lot of money and resources in these overseas adventures, and that's not good for the economy. And so if Trump does win, I think what you're going to see is, in a sense, more of the same, in that it's a steady and slow decline in the relationship between Trump and Erdoğan, and it will become kind of very flat and static. At the same time, I think there's a good chance that if things continue to go off the rails between the United States and Turkey, that even a Trump victory is going to bring forth sanctions. There's a lot of pressure building in the Pentagon to apply sanctions. Trump focuses on trade, and he realizes that actually right now the United States still has a trade surplus with Turkey. It's a minor one relative to the U.S. economy, but it's one of the few countries in the world in which the United States actually has a trading surplus. And it's hard to say, how much that plays into Trump's thinking.
Obviously, if Trump gets reelected, we'll see at the Senate as well. If Democrats still take over Senate, that means that there is no Mitch McConnell anymore. And since White House is, in control by Trump, then I think there will be more incentives for Democrats to even push harder to put pressure on Trump to do something. At least the CAATSA sanctions, which I think most likely will pass. Last time this ready to go, and there are other sanctions packages that passed at the Congress and then passed at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but again stopped by Mitch McConnell.
Right. I mean, the thing, if Mitch McConnell is working very closely with the White House to avoid those sanctions, the CAATSA sanctions being imposed on Turkey. Now, that may or may not change, but I mean, if the Democrats, if kind of a weird scenario, but if the Democrats take the Senate and Trump is reelected, one thing you can count on is 4 years of constant bickering and fighting between the White House and Congress, and the focus on almost anything else is going to be lost. Real fast about Nick Burns. If Nick Burns were brought into a really senior position, that would be good for Turkey, because Nick is one of those people who realizes that to equate Turkey with Erdoğan is a mistake. I wouldn't say that he's like a great friend of Turkey, but he recognizes that distinction, and that's valuable. let's see, who was one of the other? Michelle Flournoy. Everybody believes she's going to become the Secretary of Defense. She has the background. She has the connections. I think it's really likely. See, one of the other names you mentioned. One name you didn't mention. As you know, Doug Silliman has been carving out a role for himself in a think tank and a consulting firm and all that. I would not be surprised to see him try to get something. And you know, he was at one time deputy chief of mission in Turkey. He served as ambassador to Iraq. He knows the neighborhood. It'll be interesting to see how kind of conservative or Republican never Trumpers or never Trumpsters, however, whatever the name is, the never Trump people, what they do to try to get back into the system. I'd be surprised to see Rich Armitage, you know, work for a Biden administration. It would be good because I have a lot of, I think Rich Armitage is a really smart guy. But I'd be surprised if that happened. And there was one other name you mentioned. Brett. We can talk about Brett another
yes,
time.
I wanted to end this by
Okay.
about 45 minutes,
Yeah.
but hopefully we can do another one this week. We can talk and find the available time for you, and
Okay.
we go a little more deeper into the people, the person that would be interesting to see. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
This has been very insightful. Your decades-long foreign service experience really helping us and those who are following Turkey-U.S. relations. Your experience very important and helpful. And again, thank you also for your continued support and contributions to Ahval. Your frequent columns are always very helpful to, again, those who want to understand the dynamics between U.S., especially U.S.-Turkish relations, and hopefully we'll continue to see your these very valuable additions, and hopefully see you very soon again before the elections to continue talk about more names and names with the Turkish history.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.